call came in at 6:43 a.m. on a crisp October morning. Detective James Harlow was halfway through his first coffee when his phone buzzed with the familiar ringtone he'd assigned to dispatch. "Harlow," he answered, voice still rough with sleep. "Homicide at the Westlake Towers, apartment 1507, the dispatcher reported. Victim is female, mid-30s. Husband found her this morning and called it in." Harlow sighed, already reaching for his jacket. "On my way." He'd been a homicide detective for 12 years in the Portland Police Bureau, but something about early morning crime scenes always felt more disturbing. The jarring contrast between the peaceful dawn and the violent end to someone's night. As he drove through the quiet streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that this case would be different. The Westlake Towers wasn't just any building. It was one of the most exclusive addresses in the city, where the wealthy and powerful made their homes. Harlow flashed his badge at the uniformed officers guarding the entrance to the luxury apartment building. The lobby, all marble and gleaming surfaces, the kind of opulence that made Harlow, with his department store suits and scuffed shoes, feel distinctly out of place. The elevator whisked him to the 15th floor, where more officers stood outside apartment 1507. "What have we got?" Harlow asked the first responder. "Female victim, multiple stab wounds," the young officer replied, his face slightly pale. "Pretty brutal scene in there. Husband's in the bedroom with Officer Reyes. Name's Michael Caine, big shot lawyer with Henderson and Blake." Harlow nodded and stepped into the apartment, immediately struck by the stark contrast between the tasteful luxury of the space and the violence that had occurred within it. The living room was immaculate. Expensive furniture, original artwork on the walls, panoramic views of the city. No signs of struggle there. The trail of blood began in the hallway, leading to the master bedroom. The bedroom told a different story. Blood spattered the cream-colored walls and soaked into the plush carpet. The victim lay between the king-size bed and the wall, dressed in an elegant nightgown now stained dark red. Dr. Samantha Chen, the medical examiner, knelt beside the body, her experienced hands already at work. "Morning, James," she greeted without looking up. "Meet Rebecca Caine, 34 years old, according to her husband. Multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen. I count at least 15. Death occurred approximately between 1 and 3 a.m. Harlow crouched beside her, studying the victim. Rebecca Caine had been beautiful. Long dark hair, delicate features, slender build. Even in death, there was a certain grace to her. "Weapon?" he asked. Chen shook her head. "Not found yet. Based on the wounds, I'd say a medium-sized kitchen knife, maybe 6 inches. Harlow's gaze moved to the victim's hands. Manicured nails, a wedding ring with a diamond that could pay his salary for a year, and something else, defensive wounds. "She fought back," he observed. Michael Caine sat rigid on a chair in the corner of the room, a uniformed officer standing beside him. His expensive pajamas were stained with his wife's blood, his hands trembling slightly despite his otherwise composed demeanor. He was handsome in a polished way, salt and pepper hair, strong jawline, the kind of man accustomed to commanding attention in any room. "Mr. Caine?" Harlow approached him. "I'm Detective Harlow. I know this is difficult, but I need to ask you some questions." Caine looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. "I found her like this. When I woke up," he stated, his voice steady. "I was sleeping in the guest room last night. We had an argument." Harlow noted this without comment. "Can you tell me about last night? What time did you go to bed? Did you hear anything unusual?" Caine shook his head. "I took a sleeping pill around 11. Didn't wake up until my alarm at 6:30. That's when I came into." He gestured toward the body, unable to finish the sentence. "What was the argument about?" Harlow asked, watching Caine's face carefully. A muscle twitched in the lawyer's jaw, a momentary break in his composed facade. "It was personal," he replied stiffly. "Nothing relevant to this." He waved vaguely at the bloody scene. Officer Reyes, who had been standing silently beside Caine, caught Harlow's eye and gave a slight nod toward the hallway. "Excuse me a moment," Harlow said, following Reyes out of earshot. "Found something interesting in the bathroom," Reyes whispered, leading Harlow across the hall. The master bathroom was as luxurious as the rest of the apartment, marble countertops, a shower large enough for 4 people, a deep soaking tub. Reyes pointed to the wastebasket beside the toilet. Inside was a crumpled envelope, torn open in haste. No return address, just Michael Caine's name and the apartment number in typed text. Harlow carefully retrieved it with a gloved hand. Inside was a single slip of paper with 5 typed words. "She's not who you think." Back at the precinct, Harlow started building his murder board. Rebecca Caine's driver's license photo smiled back at him, a beautiful woman with an enigmatic smile. Beneath it, he pinned the photo of the mysterious note. His partner, Detective Maya Rodriguez, handed him a coffee. "Background check on our Vic is coming up surprisingly thin," she reported. "Rebecca Caine, née Lawrence, married to Michael Caine for 3 years. No criminal record, no employment history I can find. Social media presence only goes back about 4 years." Harlow frowned. 4 years? Nothing before that? Rodriguez shook her head. "It's like she didn't exist before 2019. No school records, no previous addresses, nothing." Harlow sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "What about the husband?" Rodriguez pulled up another file. "Michael Caine, 42, Harvard Law, senior partner at Henderson and Blake, specializing in corporate law. Previously married to Eliza Thornton, divorced 6 years ago. No children from either marriage. And get this, he just made partner last month, 7-figure annual income." "Let's talk to the ex-wife," Harlow decided, "and I want to know more about Rebecca's past. Something doesn't add up." As if on cue, Dr. Chin appeared in the doorway of the detective bullpen. "James, got a minute?" Her expression was uncharacteristically troubled. Harlow followed her to a quiet corner. "Preliminary autopsy findings," she said, handing him a folder. "Rebecca Caine's death was indeed from multiple stab wounds, but I found something else during the examination." Harlow opened the folder, scanning the medical terminology. Chen continued, her voice lowered. "Rebecca Caine was born male. She'd undergone gender reassignment surgery, very high quality, probably at least 5 years ago." Harlow looked up sharply. "Any indication the husband knew?" Chen shrugged. "That's your department, detective, but it might explain why her background is so thin. Many transgender individuals create new identities after transition." The anonymous note suddenly took on new meaning. "She's not who you think." Harlow returned to his desk, sharing the new information with Rodriguez. "So someone sent Michael Caine a note revealing his wife's gender history," Rodriguez mused. "Question is, did he already know? And if not, how did he react?" Harlow nodded grimly. "And who sent the note? That's our first priority. I want the envelope tested for prints, DNA, anything that might identify the sender." He checked his watch. "Michael Caine should be done with processing by now. Let's bring him back in for a more detailed interview." As they prepared to leave, Officer Reyes approached with another evidence bag. "Found this hidden between the mattress and box spring in the guest room where the husband was sleeping." Inside was a small handgun, unregistered according to the preliminary check. "Looks like Mr. Caine might have been expecting trouble," Harlow observed, "or planning to cause some." Michael Caine sat in the interview room, now dressed in an expensive suit despite the early hour, his lawyer already at his side. "Mr. Caine, thank you for coming in," Harlow began, choosing his words carefully. "We have some additional questions about your relationship with Rebecca." Caine nodded stiffly. "Of course, anything to help find who did this, to my wife." Harlow placed a photocopy of the anonymous note on the table between them. "This was found in your bathroom. Can you tell me about it?" Caine stared at the note, his expression unreadable. "I received it yesterday, in the mail." Harlow leaned forward slightly. "And what did you think it meant?" Caine's lawyer placed a warning hand on his client's arm, but Caine shook it off. "I had no idea. It seemed like some kind of prank or mistake." Harlow studied him carefully. "Mr. Caine, were you aware that Rebecca was transgender?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Caine's face went through a rapid succession of expressions: shock, disbelief, anger, before settling into careful neutrality. "That's absurd. he finally said. "I would have known. We were intimate. He trailed off, doubt creeping into his voice. His lawyer intervened. "Detective, where exactly are you going with this line of questioning?" Harlow kept his eyes on Kane. "We've confirmed through medical examination that Rebecca was assigned male at birth and underwent gender reassignment surgery before you met her. I'm trying to establish whether this information was known to Mr. Kane prior to receiving this note." Kane's composure cracked. "This is impossible. You're lying." Rodriguez silently placed the preliminary autopsy report on the table. Kane stared at it, the medical terminology and clinical descriptions washing over him. His hands began to shake. "No," he whispered. "No, this can't be true." "Your argument last night," Harlow pressed gently, "was it about this?" Kane's lawyer stood up. "My client is not answering any more questions right now." But Kane seemed not to hear him. "I confronted her," he said, his voice hollow. "I showed her the note, asked her what it meant. She laughed at first, thought it was a joke. Then she saw my face and realized I was serious." He looked up at Harlow, his eyes haunted. "She admitted it, said she'd been planning to tell me for years, but was afraid of how I'd react. Afraid I wouldn't love her anymore if I knew." His voice broke on the last words. "We argued. I said terrible things. I went to the guest room, took a sleeping pill. That's the last thing I remember until I found her this morning." Harlow exchanged glances with Rodriguez. "Mr. Kane, we found an unregistered handgun hidden in the guest room. Can you explain that?" Kane's expression shifted to confusion. "What? I don't own a gun. I've never owned a gun." His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently in his ear. Kane shook his head. "No, David, I have nothing to hide." He turned back to the detectives. "I didn't kill Rebecca. Yes, I was angry. Yes, I felt betrayed. But I loved her. Whatever she was before I met her doesn't change that." Harlow regarded him steadily. "Then you won't mind providing a DNA sample and allowing us to test your hands for gunshot residue?" Kane blinked. "Gunshot residue? I thought Rebecca was stabbed." Harlow nodded. "She was. But someone fired a gun in your apartment last night. There was a bullet lodged in the headboard of your bed. Ballistics confirmed it came from the weapon we found in the guest room." Kane paled visibly. "I didn't hear any gunshot. The sleeping pill I took, it knocked me out completely." Back in the bullpen, Harlow and Rodriguez compared notes. "He seems genuinely shocked about his wife being transgender," Rodriguez observed. "And about the gun." Harlow nodded slowly. "But that doesn't mean he's innocent. He admits to arguing with her, admits to feeling betrayed, and conveniently takes a sleeping pill that renders him unconscious during the time of the murder." The preliminary forensics report arrived, adding new complications. The gun had been fired once, but there were no fingerprints on it, wiped clean. The knife used in the stabbing was found in a dumpster 3 blocks from the apartment building, also wiped of prints. Most interestingly, the envelope containing the anonymous note had a partial fingerprint that didn't match either Michael or Rebecca Kane. "So we have a third person involved," Harlow mused. "Someone who knew Rebecca's history and wanted Michael to know too." Detective Rodriguez pulled up Rebecca Kane's phone records. In the week before her death, she received multiple calls from the same number, registered to a James Martinez. She continued typing, pulling up Martinez's information. Former military, works as private security now, and get this, he lives in the same building as the Kanes, 3 floors down. Harlow grabbed his jacket. "Let's pay Mr. Martinez a visit." The ride to Westlake Towers was silent, both detectives processing the emerging narrative. A wife with a hidden past, an anonymous note revealing her secret, a husband who claims to have been unconscious during her murder, and now a private security professional somehow connected to it all. The pieces were starting to align, but the picture they formed was still unclear. Rodriguez broke the silence. "If Kane did kill her, why stage it so badly? He's a smart lawyer. He'd know we'd find the inconsistencies." James Martinez's apartment was smaller than the Kanes, but still luxurious by normal standards. Martinez himself was a surprise, not the burly ex-military type they'd expected, but a slender man in his 50s with intelligent eyes and a precise manner of speaking. "Detectives?" he greeted them at the door. "I presume this is about Rebecca Kane?" Harlow raised an eyebrow. "News travels fast. Martinez gestured for them to enter. In a building like this, yes, especially when it involves someone I knew. Inside, the apartment was meticulously organized, almost Spartan in its lack of personal touches. How exactly did you know Mrs. Kane? Rodriguez asked. Martinez sat in an armchair, indicating they should take the sofa across from him. I knew her before she was Mrs. Kane, he replied carefully. Before she was Rebecca Lawrence even. I knew her as Robert Lawrence. Harlow leaned forward. You knew Rebecca before her transition? Martinez nodded. We served together. Iraq, second tour. Robert Lawrence was one of the best intelligence officers I ever worked with. Brilliant analyst, good in the field too. He paused, choosing his words deliberately. We lost touch after our tours ended. I wasn't surprised when I heard she had transitioned. There were signs, looking back, but I was surprised to run into her here 3 months ago. She recognized me immediately in the elevator, asked me to keep her past private, said her husband didn't know. Rodriguez studied Martinez's impassive face. Those calls to her phone last week, what were they about? Martinez's expression tightened. I was warning her. Someone had been asking questions about her past, someone who knew about Robert Lawrence and was very interested in Rebecca Kane's current life. Who? Harlow pressed. Martinez shook his head. I don't know. A woman contacted me through my security firm, claiming to be doing background checks for a high-level position Rebecca had applied for. But the questions were too personal, too specific about her transition. I got suspicious, did some digging. The company she claimed to represent didn't exist. He stood, moving to a desk where he retrieved a folder. I documented everything, planned to give this to Rebecca the day she was killed, but she didn't show up for our meeting. He handed the folder to Harlow. Inside were detailed notes, phone transcripts, even a grainy surveillance photo of a woman leaving Martinez's office building. Though the image was blurry, something about the figure seemed familiar to Harlow. Do you own a gun, Mr. Martinez? Rodriguez asked casually. Martinez didn't hesitate. Yes, registered Glock 19. Would you like to see my permit? Martinez's gun was accounted for, registered, and locked in a safe. It hadn't been fired recently. His alibi for the night of the murder checked out too. He'd been working security at a corporate event until 2 a.m., verified by multiple witnesses. Back in the car, Harlow studied the surveillance photo from Martinez's file. Why does she look familiar? He muttered. Rodriguez took the photo, examining it more closely. Wait a minute. She pulled up a different image on her tablet. Michael Kane at a law firm function 6 months earlier. Beside him stood a striking blonde woman, Eliza Thornton, Kane's ex-wife. The similarity was unmistakable, despite the different angle and poor quality of Martinez's surveillance image. So, Kane's ex-wife was investigating his current wife's past, Harlow mused. Question is, did she just send the anonymous note, or did she take more direct action? Eliza Thornton's office was in a sleek downtown building, her name on the door beneath Thornton Consulting Executive Recruitment. She greeted the detectives with cool professionalism, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe style that emphasized her sharp features. This is about Michael, I assume, she said, gesturing for them to sit. I heard about Rebecca. Terrible thing. Her tone conveyed polite concern without any genuine emotion. How well did you know Rebecca? Harlow asked. Eliza shrugged elegantly. Hardly at all. We met at a few social functions. Michael and I maintained a cordial relationship after our divorce. Professional courtesy. Rodriguez placed Martinez's surveillance photo on the desk. Is this you, Ms. Thornton, leaving Martinez Security 3 weeks ago? Eliza barely glanced at it. I meet with many security firms in my line of work. Background checks are essential in executive recruitment. And was Rebecca Kane a candidate for one of your executive positions? Harlow pressed. Eliza's smile remained fixed, but something hardened in her eyes. No, Rebecca was not qualified for any position I would handle. Her dismissive tone spoke volumes. Ms. Thornton, Rodriguez interjected, we have evidence that you specifically investigated Rebecca's history, including her gender transition, information that was later anonymously sent to Michael Kane. Eliza's composure wavered for just a moment. I'm not sure what you're implying, Detective. If Michael recently learned something about his wife's past, it had nothing to do with me. Harlow leaned forward. Where were you between 1 and 3 a.m. yesterday morning? Eliza raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. At home, asleep, alone unfortunately, so no one can verify that. Am I a suspect, Detective Harlow? Eliza Thornton's home revealed a woman of expensive tastes and meticulous habits. With a search warrant in hand, Harlow and Rodriguez examined the spacious downtown condo while Eliza watched with barely contained fury. Nothing immediately suspicious presented itself, no bloody clothes, no weapons, no obvious evidence connecting her to Rebecca's murder. But in her home office, Rodriguez found something interesting. A file folder labeled simply RC. Inside were documents tracing Robert Lawrence's military career, medical records from a private clinic specializing in gender reassignment surgery, and photos, old photos of a handsome young man in uniform who had Rebecca's same eyes, same smile. She certainly did her homework, Rodriguez murmured. Harlow nodded, then noticed something on Eliza's desk calendar. An appointment marked for the day of Rebecca's death. MC 9 p.m. Michael Caine? When confronted, Eliza's explanation was simple. Yes, I met with Michael that night, at a restaurant downtown. We discussed a potential client. You can verify with the restaurant staff. The restaurant confirmed Eliza's story. Security footage showed her and Michael Caine dining together from 9 p.m. until just after 11 p.m. They appeared to be having an intense conversation, though without audio, it was impossible to know the content. More importantly, the footage showed Michael leaving alone at 11:05 p.m., while Eliza remained at the table paying the bill. She left at 11:20 p.m., walking in the opposite direction. So Caine wasn't completely honest about his whereabouts that night, Harlow noted. He mentioned the argument with Rebecca, but not the dinner with his ex-wife beforehand. Rodriguez frowned, but the timeline still works. He could have gone home, confronted Rebecca about the note, taken a sleeping pill, and been unconscious during the murder. Harlow shook his head. Too many coincidences, too many lies. We're still missing something. That something arrived in the form of DNA results from the crime scene. We found DNA under Rebecca's fingernails that doesn't match Michael Caine, the lab technician reported. It's female DNA. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Eliza Thornton? The technician checked his notes. We don't have a sample from her yet to compare, but there's more. The blood spatter analysis shows inconsistencies. Some of the blood on the walls doesn't match the expected pattern from the stabbing. And there's a small amount of blood that isn't Rebecca's blood type. Harlow's mind raced. She fought back harder than we thought, injured her attacker. He turned to Rodriguez. Get a warrant for Eliza Thornton's DNA and check her for recent injuries. And I want to speak with Michael Caine again, now. Michael Caine arrived at the precinct without his lawyer this time. He looked haggard, the polished exterior crumbling under grief and stress. I should have told you about meeting Eliza, he admitted before Harlow could even start questioning him. I was afraid it would make me look guilty. Harlow studied him. What did you and Eliza discuss at dinner? Caine ran a hand through his hair. She asked to meet. Said she had important information about Rebecca. When I got there, she showed me evidence of Rebecca's past. Birth certificate for Robert Lawrence, military records, medical reports. He shook his head, still struggling to process it. She said I had a right to know who I was really married to, that Rebecca, Robert, had deceived me, made a fool of me. Harlow watched him carefully. And how did that make you feel? Confused, angry, betrayed. Caine's voice was raw with emotion, but also guilty. Rebecca must have been terrified of this exact reaction, of being rejected for her past rather than accepted for who she is now. His use of present tense when speaking of his wife didn't escape Harlow's notice. I went home and confronted her. It was ugly. I said things I can never take back. Tears welled in his eyes. She admitted everything, said she'd fallen in love with me and was afraid to lose me, that she'd planned to tell me so many times but could never find the courage. He wiped his eyes. I told her I needed space to think, went to the guest room, took a sleeping pill, and in the morning, he couldn't finish. Mr. Caine, Harlow said gently, did Eliza seem particularly upset about your marriage to Rebecca? Caine looked up, confusion crossing his features. Upset? No. Our divorce was amicable. Eliza was the one who wanted it. We wanted different things. She was focused entirely on her career. I wanted a family. He paused, realization dawning. Wait, you don't think Eliza... Harlow kept his expression neutral. We're exploring all possibilities. One last question. The gun found in your guest room, you're certain it isn't yours? Kane shook his head emphatically. I've never owned a gun, never even fired one. As Kane left, Rodriguez approached with new information. Eliza Thornton has a registered handgun, different model than the one found at the scene, but still. She paused, checking another report. And the doorman at Westlake Towers confirms Eliza visited frequently, including the night of the murder. She arrived at 12:30 a.m., told him she was picking up documents from Michael. Left at approximately 2 a.m. Eliza Thornton sat in the interrogation room, her lawyer present this time. The cool composure from earlier had been replaced by visible tension. Miss Thornton, Harlow began, you told us you were home alone on the night of Rebecca Kane's murder. The doorman at Westlake Towers says otherwise. Eliza's jaw tightened. I misspoke. I remembered later that I did stop by Michael's building that night to return some documents after our dinner. He'd left them at the restaurant. Harlow nodded, as if this made perfect sense. At 12:30 in the morning, that must have been some urgent paperwork. Eliza's lawyer intervened. Detective, if you have actual evidence linking my client to this crime, present it. Otherwise, this interview is over. Harlow smiled thinly. How about the cut on Ms. Thornton's forearm, the one she's been carefully hiding under her long sleeves? Eliza instinctively touched her right arm, then caught herself. I cut myself cooking, she said stiffly. It's nothing. Harlow leaned forward. Miss Thornton, we found blood at the crime scene that doesn't match Rebecca's type. We found female DNA under Rebecca's fingernails, from where she fought back against her attacker. Would that DNA match yours, Miss Thornton? Rodriguez entered with a document in hand, passing it to Harlow. And now we have a warrant for your DNA and to examine that injury. Eliza's carefully constructed facade began to crack. This is harassment. I had nothing to do with Rebecca's death. But her voice lacked conviction. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she shook her head. No, I won't say anything more without proof. Real proof, not circumstantial evidence and coincidences. The proof arrived the next morning. The DNA under Rebecca's fingernails was a match for Eliza Thornton. The blood droplets that didn't match Rebecca's type matched Eliza's. And most damning of all, gunshot residue was found on a pair of gloves discovered in Eliza's car. The same distinctive residue from the unregistered gun at the crime scene. It's enough for an arrest warrant, Rodriguez concluded as they prepared to bring Eliza in. But there was still something bothering Harlow. The gun, the staging. It feels too complicated. If Eliza wanted to kill Rebecca out of jealousy or revenge, why the elaborate setup? Why plant a gun in the guest room? She's too smart for such obvious mistakes. As they pulled up to Eliza's building, Rodriguez spotted movement through the condo windows. She's home, and it looks like she's packing. Eliza Thornton was arrested attempting to leave her building with a suitcase and one-way ticket to Mexico. At the precinct, faced with the overwhelming forensic evidence, she finally broke. But her confession wasn't what Harlow expected. I didn't go there to kill her, Eliza insisted, her perfect composure now completely shattered. I went to confront her, to tell her to leave Michael alone. He deserved better than her lies. Tears streaked her makeup. Michael and I were supposed to be together. We were perfect for each other. Then she came along with her false identity, her made-up past, seducing him with a lie. Harlow watched her carefully. So you investigated her background, sent the anonymous note to Michael. What were you hoping would happen? Eliza laughed bitterly. I thought once he knew the truth, he'd leave her, come back to me. We'd been getting closer again, working together on cases. It was just a matter of time. But he didn't react the way you expected, Rodriguez prompted. Eliza shook her head. After dinner he was upset, yes, but not the way he should have been. Not disgusted or outraged, just confused, hurt. I could tell he still loved her even knowing what she was. Her face hardened. So I went to their apartment later. use the key Michael didn't know I'd kept from our marriage. I was going to confront Rebecca myself, show her the evidence, make her leave him. She paused, reliving the moment. She was awake, sitting in the dark in their bedroom, waiting. She knew I was coming, said James Martinez had warned her someone was investigating her past. She figured out it was me. Eliza's hands began to shake. She laughed at me, said Michael would never come back to me, that he loved her completely, that even if he knew her history, he'd choose her over me every time. And that's when you attacked her? Harlow asked quietly. Eliza nodded, tears flowing freely now. I had the gun for protection, never intended to use it, but when she laughed at me, something broke inside me. I fired but missed, hit the headboard instead. She lunged at me, scratched my arm. We struggled. There was a knife on the bedside table, for opening letters, one of those silver ceremonial things. I grabbed it and... She couldn't continue. I didn't mean to stab her so many times. I just couldn't stop. All those years of building my life, my career, while Michael moved on with someone living a lie. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I planted the gun in the guest room afterward. Thought it might implicate Michael, or at least create confusion. She looked up, suddenly defiant. She deserved it, deceiving everyone, pretending to be something she wasn't. In the observation room, Michael Caine watched Eliza's confession with horror etched on his face. I had no idea, he murmured to Harlow. No idea she still felt that way about me, that she was capable of this. Harlow studied him. And Rebecca, how do you feel, knowing what you know now? Michael was silent for a long moment. I wish she'd trusted me enough to tell me herself, but it wouldn't have changed how I felt about her, who she was before I met her. That was just one part of her story, not the whole of who she was. He turned away from the window, unable to watch Eliza anymore. The irony is, Rebecca was the most honest person I knew, in every way that mattered, more authentic than most people who've never had to question their identity. He looked at Harlow with eyes full of grief. She died because someone couldn't accept her truth. What does that say about us, as a society? 3 months later, Harlow stood in the courtroom as Eliza Thornton was sentenced to life in prison for first-degree murder. The case had attracted national attention, sparking difficult conversations about transgender rights, disclosure, and acceptance. Michael Caine had become an unexpected advocate, establishing a foundation in Rebecca's name to support transgender individuals facing discrimination and violence. As Harlow left the courthouse, James Martinez approached him. Detective, thank you for bringing her justice. Harlow nodded. Just doing my job. Martinez smiled sadly. Rebecca once told me that living authentically was worth any price. I don't think she meant this, though. He handed Harlow an envelope. She gave me this the last time we spoke. Asked me to deliver it to Michael if anything ever happened to her. I gave him the original, but thought you might want to see a copy, to understand. Alone in his apartment that night, Harlow read Rebecca's letter. It was dated 3 weeks before her death, around the time Martinez had first warned her about someone investigating her past. My dearest Michael, if you're reading this, something has happened to me, and my past has finally caught up with me in ways I've always feared. I know you must have questions, must feel betrayed by what you've learned about who I was before we met. I was born Robert Lawrence, but that name never felt like mine. From my earliest memories, I knew my true self was trapped in a body that didn't reflect who I really was. I won't burden you with the details of my journey, the pain, the rejection, the fear. What matters is that when I finally became Rebecca, I became myself for the first time. I met you 2 years after my transition was complete. I told myself I would tell you the truth when the moment was right, after our 3rd date, after 6 months, after you proposed, after the wedding, after we'd built a life so strong that nothing could break it. But the right moment never came, because I was a coward. I was terrified of seeing disgust in your eyes, of losing the one person who made me feel completely loved and accepted. This was my failing, not yours. You deserved the truth from the beginning. Whatever you're feeling now, anger, betrayal, confusion, you have every right to those emotions. But please know this, everything between us was real. My love for you was the most genuine thing in my life. The woman you fell in love with is who I truly am, who I was always meant to be. If, knowing everything, you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I will spend the rest of my life earning back your trust. If not, I understand. Either way, I needed you to hear the truth from me, finally, even if it's too late. With all my love, Rebecca. Harlow folded the letter, deeply moved by Rebecca's words. The tragic irony wasn't lost on him. She'd finally found the courage to tell her husband the truth, but fate had intervened in the cruelest way. He wondered if Michael would ever have received this letter had Rebecca lived. Had she sensed the danger coming from Eliza's investigation, or was this simply her attempt to finally face the truth she'd been avoiding? His phone rang, breaking his reverie. It was Rodriguez. Just got a call from the prison. Eliza Thornton wants to speak with us. Says there's more to the story we should know. Harlow checked his watch. Nearly midnight. This can't wait until morning. Rodriguez's tone was serious. She's claiming she didn't act alone. The fluorescent lights of the prison visitation room cast harsh shadows on Eliza Thornton's once-see beautiful face. 3 months of incarceration had aged her visibly, her blonde hair now showing dark roots, her manicured hands now bitten to the quick. "Thank you for coming, Detective," she said, her voice hoarse. Harlow studied her, skeptical. "You said you had new information." Eliza nodded, glancing nervously at the guard. "I didn't lie about killing Rebecca," she began. "That happened exactly as I confessed, but the investigation into her past, I didn't initiate that." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I was approached by someone who already knew Rebecca's history, someone who wanted Michael to know the truth but needed an intermediary, someone who knew my feelings for Michael could be leveraged." "Who?" Harlow demanded. Eliza hesitated, fear flickering across her face. "Dr. William Mercer. He runs a private clinic specializing in gender reassignment surgery. He's also Michael's cousin." This was new information. Michael had never mentioned a cousin in the medical field. "Mercer claimed he recognized Rebecca from his clinic years ago," Eliza continued. "Said he had an ethical obligation to inform Michael that his wife had deceived him, but he couldn't approach Michael directly due to doctor-patient confidentiality and family complications." Rodriguez, who had been silent until now, interjected, "So he manipulated you into doing his dirty work?" Eliza laughed bitterly. "Provided the initial information, encouraged my investigation, kept feeding me details about Rebecca's past that I couldn't have discovered on my own, medical records that should have been confidential." "Why come forward with this now?" Harlow asked, still skeptical. Eliza's eyes hardened. "Mercer visited me last week, said he was sorry things had gone so far, that he never intended for anyone to get hurt." Her hands clenched into fists. "He used me, set me up as the fall guy while he protected his reputation, his practice, and now he gets to play the innocent bystander while I rot in prison for the rest of my life?" Harlow exchanged glances with Rodriguez. "Do you have proof of these interactions with Dr. Mercer?" Eliza nodded slowly. "Check my email accounts, personal and business. There are messages from him using an alias, but I can prove it's him. And I kept a journal documenting our meetings. It's in a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Box 247. My assistant has the key." The next morning, with warrant in hand, Harlow and Rodriguez retrieved Eliza's journal. Its contents were disturbing. Detailed accounts of meetings with Dr. Mercer spanning 6 months before Rebecca's murder. According to Eliza's meticulous documentation, Mercer had approached her at a medical charity gala, discreetly mentioning that he had concerning information about Michael's new wife. Initial innocent curiosity had gradually transformed into obsession as Mercer fed her increasingly intimate details about Rebecca's past life as Robert. Most troubling were Eliza's notes about Mercer's apparent motives. Mercer seems fixated on the idea that Rebecca is deceiving Michael. Says it's a betrayal of family. Mentioned family inheritance several times. Worried about Rebecca's influence? The last entry, dated the day before the murder, was particularly chilling. "Meeting with M tonight. We'll show him everything. WM says whatever happens next is for the best." Harlow contacted Michael Caine immediately. "Dr. William Mercer, you never mentioned he was your cousin." Michael frowned. confusion evident even through the video call. Because he's not. I don't have a cousin named William Mercer. I don't have any family in the medical field at all. This revelation sent the investigation in a new direction. If Mercer had lied about his connection to Michael, what else had he lied about? Rodriguez ran a background check on Dr. William Mercer. On paper, he appeared legitimate. Prestigious medical school, board certifications, a well-respected private practice. But digging deeper revealed inconsistencies. His clinic had been established just 4 years ago, around the same time Rebecca Kane had appeared in Portland. And more disturbing, before opening his practice, Dr. Mercer had worked at the same military hospital where Robert Lawrence had been stationed during his final tour of duty. We need to talk to Martinez again, Harlow decided. He knew Rebecca from her military days. Maybe he knows Mercer too. James Martinez was surprisingly unsurprised by their questions about Dr. Mercer. I wondered when you'd get around to him, he said, inviting them into his apartment. William Mercer wasn't his name back then. He was Dr. William Montgomery, military psychiatrist. He specialized in treating soldiers with gender dysphoria. Martinez poured himself a drink, his hand slightly unsteady. Robert, Rebecca was one of his patients. There were rumors that Montgomery's approach was unorthodox, that he believed gender dysphoria could be cured rather than treated through transition. Martinez's expression darkened. Several patients filed complaints about his methods. The military launched an investigation, but before it concluded, Montgomery resigned his commission and disappeared. I never made the connection between Montgomery and Mercer until Rebecca mentioned her surgeon during one of our conversations. The way she described him triggered my memory. Did Rebecca know that Mercer was Montgomery? Harlow asked. Martinez shook his head. I don't think so. The man completely reinvented himself. New name, new appearance, he even had cosmetic surgery. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through old photos until he found one. This is Dr. Montgomery during our deployment. The image showed a thin man with a receding hairline and wire-rimmed glasses, barely recognizable as the polished, confident Dr. Mercer they had seen in recent photographs. When I realized who he was, I tried to warn Rebecca, but she thought I was being paranoid. She said Mercer had been nothing but supportive of her transition, that he was one of the few doctors who truly understood what she'd been through. Martinez's voice cracked. I should have tried harder to convince her. So Mercer performed Rebecca's surgery? Rodriguez asked, incredulous. Even though he previously opposed transition? Martinez nodded grimly. That's what makes this so twisted. He completely changed his public stance, became known as an advocate for transgender rights. His clinic was considered one of the best, but privately, he trailed off. I always wondered if his change of heart was genuine. Harlow could see the pieces aligning. He found her again, inserted himself into her life as her surgeon, then tracked her to Portland and set up practice here. This wasn't random. This was targeted. But one question remained unanswered. Why? What could possibly drive someone to such elaborate patient stalking? Martinez's expression was grim. Montgomery Mercer was obsessed with proving his theories right, that transgender identity was a psychological disorder that could be cured. When his military approach failed, I think he changed tactics. Dr. William Mercer's clinic was a sleek, modern facility in an upscale medical complex. Armed with a warrant, Harlow and Rodriguez arrived with a team of officers, prepared for resistance. But the office was eerily quiet, the reception desk unmanned. Dr. Mercer canceled all appointments today, explained a confused office manager who arrived midway through their search. Said he had a family emergency. In Mercer's private office, they found a meticulously organized space. Not a paper out of place, not a personal item in sight. It's like a showroom, not a real office, Rodriguez observed. No photos, no mementos. But the computer yielded results. While most patient files were properly encrypted, a hidden folder contained extensive documentation on one particular patient, Rebecca Kane, formerly Robert Lawrence. Years of notes, photographs tracking her transition, surveillance reports on her movements and relationships. Most disturbing was a document titled Project Reversal, a pseudo-scientific manifesto about correcting gender dysphoria through psychological manipulation. This goes beyond doctor-patient obsession, Harlow said, scrolling through the disturbing files. He's been stalking her for years. Rodriguez pointed to a series of photos showing Rebecca and Michael at various locations, their home, restaurants, even vacation spots. He's been watching them both. As they dug deeper, they uncovered another folder containing information about other former patients, all transgender individuals who had been under Montgomery's care in the military, all of whom had completed transitions despite his treatment. Some had moved on to successful lives. Others had died by suicide. Each file was meticulously updated, as if Mercer was conducting a long-term unauthorized study, and each contained a failure analysis, documenting where Montgomery's intervention had gone wrong. Rebecca's file was marked Final Subject. The last entry had been made the day after her murder. Project concluded. Failure confirmed. Alternative approach necessary. An APB went out for Dr. William Mercer immediately. His home was empty, clearly vacated in haste. Drawers left open, clothes missing, passport gone from the safe. His credit card showed a flurry of recent activity, a large cash withdrawal, a gas station near the airport, a purchase at an international terminal. He's running, Rodriguez concluded. But where? And was this always his plan, or had Eliza's confession forced his hand? Harlow kept returning to the Project Reversal document, disturbed by its clinical detachment. He sees these people as experiments, not patients, he told Rodriguez. Failures to be analyzed, not lives destroyed. One passage was particularly chilling. Subject RL/RC represents the ultimate test case. Unlike previous subjects, complete surgical transition was permitted to proceed under my supervision. Hypothesis: even with physical transformation, psychological truth will eventually surface. Marriage to subject MC creates ideal stress conditions to test stability of female identity construct. Michael Caine was devastated by the revelations about Rebecca's surgeon. She trusted him completely, he told Harlow during their next meeting, said he understood her in ways other doctors didn't, that he never judged her. Michael's face hardened, and all along he was using her for some sick experiment? Manipulating her life? My life? He paced the conference room, anger radiating from him. This was never about protecting me from deception. This was about proving his twisted theories right. Harlow nodded solemnly. Montgomery appears to have devoted his career to validating his belief that gender transition is a mistake. When his efforts to cure transgender soldiers failed, he changed tactics, became outwardly supportive while secretly documenting what he believed would be inevitable failures. Michael stopped pacing. But Rebecca wasn't failing. We were happy. Our marriage was strong. A realization dawned on his face. That's why he had to introduce Eliza into the equation. Rebecca wasn't going to fail on her own. 3 days later, Interpol located William Mercer in Bangkok, preparing to board another flight to an undisclosed location. His extradition was arranged immediately. The charges were numerous: conspiracy to commit murder, violation of medical ethics, illegal disclosure of confidential patient information, stalking, and more. As Harlow prepared for the high-profile interrogation, he received an unexpected call from Eliza Thornton's attorney. My client is prepared to testify against Dr. Mercer in exchange for a reduced sentence. Harlow wasn't surprised by the offer, but what came next was unexpected. There's more, Detective. Something she hasn't told anyone yet. Mercer didn't just manipulate her into investigating Rebecca. He deliberately fostered her obsession with Michael. There were drugs involved, something he added to her drinks during their meetings. She says it affected her judgment, increased her paranoia and jealousy. The interrogation room fell silent as William Mercer was led in, handcuffed and dressed in prison orange, a stark contrast to the polished doctor who had built a career on deception. His demeanor was calm, almost detached, as if the proceedings were happening to someone else. Dr. Montgomery, Harlow began deliberately, using his original name. Or do you prefer Mercer now? A flicker of annoyance crossed Mercer's face, the first crack in his composed facade. My name is legally William Mercer, he replied coolly, though I suppose legal distinctions mean little to you. Harlow laid out the evidence methodically: the surveillance of Rebecca, the manipulation of Eliza, the falsified medical credentials, the elaborate Project Reversal documentation. Throughout the presentation, Mercer remained impassive, until Harlow reached Rebecca's letter to Michael. As Harlow read portions aloud, Mercer's expression changed subtly. Disgust mingled with something that looked almost like grief. "Why, Rebecca?" Harlow finally asked, setting aside his notes. "Out of all your former patients, why focus so intensely on her?" Mercer's lawyer advised him to remain silent, but after a long pause he spoke anyway. "Because she was the most convincing," he said softly, "the most complete in her delusion. Robert Lawrence was brilliant, disciplined, exceptional in every way. When he came to me, I thought I could save him from making a terrible mistake." His voice took on a passionate edge. "Do you have any idea what these surgeries do? The irreversible damage? I tried to help him see that his dysphoria was psychological, not physical, that changing his body wouldn't fix the underlying issues." Harlow kept his expression neutral, though disgust churned inside him. "But Rebecca seemed happy after her transition. By all accounts, she was thriving." Mercer's face twisted. "A perfect performance. She fooled everyone. Her friends, her husband, even herself. But I knew the truth would surface eventually. It always does." "So you orchestrated an elaborate experiment," Rodriguez interjected, "creating stress in her Maria." Mercer's trial became a national sensation, spotlighting issues of transgender rights, medical ethics, and the devastating consequences of prejudice disguised as concern. Eliza Thornton received a reduced sentence in exchange for her testimony, though she would still spend 20 years in prison for Rebecca's murder. Evidence suggested Mercer had indeed administered mind-altering substances during their meetings, drugs that heightened paranoia and lowered impulse control. Though Eliza's lawyers acknowledged, this didn't absolve her of responsibility. Michael Caine channeled his grief into advocacy, establishing a foundation to support transgender individuals and fight discrimination in medical care. The Rebecca Caine Foundation specifically focused on vetting healthcare providers and creating safe resources for transgender military veterans. On the one-year anniversary of Rebecca's death, Harlow visited her grave. The elegant headstone read simply, "Rebecca Caine, beloved wife, true to herself." Michael had chosen the inscription, a final affirmation of his acceptance and love. Harlow placed flowers beside the small photograph embedded in the stone. Rebecca smiling, radiant at her wedding. "We got him, Rebecca," Harlow said quietly. "Mercer will spend the rest of his life in prison." The legal system had worked as intended. Eliza convicted of murder, Mercer of conspiracy and numerous ethical violations. But justice felt hollow in the face of such a senseless loss. A woman had died simply for being herself, for daring to live authentically in a world that too often punished such courage. As Harlow turned to leave, he noticed James Martinez approaching with his own bouquet. They nodded to each other in silent understanding. Two people connected by a woman who had touched their lives, whose truth had ultimately cost her everything. 6 months after Mercer's conviction, Harlow received a letter from Eliza Thornton. "I think about Rebecca every day," she wrote. "Not just that I took her life, but that I never saw her for who she truly was. Mercer preyed on my prejudices, my insecurities, my lingering feelings for Michael. But I was the one who acted. I was the one who couldn't accept that Michael had found happiness with someone else, someone more authentic than I ever allowed myself to be." The letter continued, explaining how Eliza was working with prison psychologists to understand her actions, to confront her own biases. "Rebecca's death can't be undone," she concluded, "but perhaps by sharing my story, how easily hatred can be manipulated, how quickly prejudice can turn violent, I can prevent someone else from making the same terrible choice." In his final report on the case, Harlow wrote, "Rebecca Caine's murder represents a tragic intersection of personal betrayal and systemic prejudice. 3 lives were destroyed. Rebecca's ended, Eliza's imprisoned, Mercer's consumed by hatred disguised as scientific inquiry. At its core, this case reminds us that the deadliest weapon is not the knife that took Rebecca's life, but the belief that anyone's identity requires external validation or approval." The file was officially closed, but Harlow knew the issues it raised would continue long after questions about authenticity, acceptance, and the human cost of denying others the right to be themselves. As he placed the file in the cabinet marked "Closed," he thought about Rebecca's letter again. "The woman you fell in love with is who I truly am," she had written. In the end, that truth was all that should have mattered.